Hey you guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be breaking down and reacting to the Framing Britney Spears documentary that the New York Times just released on Hulu and FX. I just got done watching it and I did my hair and makeup just for you guys. My last video previewing the docuseries and reading some articles with you guys really took off and you seemed really excited, so I committed myself to making this video as soon as it was over. Yes, it is literally 2 o'clock in the morning here. I'm doing this for the good of the people. If you have not watched it, go on Hulu if you have an account. There will be spoiler alerts here, but because it's a documentary, I don't really know how there could be quote-unquote spoilers because it's just a part of Britney's life and her story. But nonetheless, I digress. Your spoiler alert has been given. As always, I will link Free Britney resources that I love and are always keeping me updated in my description below. And if you want to have a more in-depth video of Free Britney to catch up and watch on, aside from the documentary, I have my own Free Britney video I will insert somewhere here. Okay, I don't know what this is going to look like after I edit it, but guys, I sat on my couch with my dogs, watched this, and took notes the entire time. I was actually pausing it to write down names and quotes, so I hope that this isn't too in-depth, but I really wanted to get it right, bring you guys through the synopsis, and reveal my thoughts. Before we are introduced to anyone in the documentary, we are introduced to viral videos, TikToks that are discussing Free Britney. We see clips from her most recent court hearing back in November of 2020 and people protesting outside of the courthouse. Once they lay the foundation, they go all the way back into her childhood and work all the way up until where we are in present day. I want to give an upfront apology because you guys know if you watched my last video, I botched so many of these names and most of them I still can't pronounce. One of the main people that we see throughout this documentary is Felicia. She is Britney's former assistant. Her house was a Britney fan's dream because she was so close to her and worked with her throughout the beginning of her career. She had all these platinum records, Britney CDs, Britney vinyl, plastered all over her walls. It was actually super sweet because you could tell that she was so proud of Britney and knew the potential that she had all along. Felicia is the first person we see in this documentary who says she never understood the conservatorship then, and she still doesn't now. A constant theme you see throughout the people in this documentary that are on Britney's side and don't understand the conservatorship are saying these things that myself and other Free Britney advocates have been saying, that with her age and her being able to work so heavily up until the past couple years when she decided to not work because of her father being her conservator, this girl was working non-stop. Next, we are introduced to Haley Hill, Britney's former stylist. I have her quoted saying, "There's so much more to her that everyone is missing." We're next introduced to Nancy Carson, who is a children's talent agent who worked with Britney very early on in her career. I also thought it was interesting that she spoke about how Lynn was super supportive and super sweet, but Jamie was always absent from Britney and her career at that point. Another person we're introduced to that we spoke about in my video last week is Kim Kamen. I hope I'm saying that correctly. She was the senior marketing director for Jive Records, which we all know was Britney Spears' record label from 1998 to 2004. This is a quote I also spoke about last week where she talks about Lynn being, again, super supporting of Britney and her career, but how Jamie was absent. And the only conversation she ever had with Jamie throughout those 6 years of working with Britney was that Jamie couldn't wait for Britney to be rich enough to buy him a boat. And then she said, "I'll leave it at that about Jamie." We're then taken back to Britney and her early days going on mall tours, which I thought was super interesting. One of the sweetest stories that Felicia spoke about was after Britney got her initial fame and her record deal, she came back to her hometown in Louisiana, took out $10,000 and told her that she wanted to go around and just hand out $100 bills to everyone in her hometown that she passed by. After we're taken into a bit of Britney's background and her rise to success, we get quickly into the fall. I knew that we as women had a long way to come with how we are perceived, but I did not realize how bad it truly was back in those early days. Britney had the worst ridicule from the media I have seen, at least of a woman. I thought it was interesting that the documentary drew a comparison to the Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton scandal that was happening around the same time that Britney's career was taking off, and then her image was starting to fall. They compared the way that the media treated Monica and labeling her names that I don't want to say, I also don't know if I'll get demonetized for, so we'll just call it S-shaming. And Britney also encountered this severely after her image started to fall. I wrote down this quote: "We don't have royalty in the US, we have celebrities." Back in this era, we did not have social media, so the paparazzi had all the power in their hands. It still amazes me though how many of these news clips that they would show, these videos, that I had already seen or included in other videos I've made about Free Britney, or ones that I was just being made aware of, that made me so uncomfortable. Time and time again, these news outlets, men and women alike, grown men and women, were asking this young woman who had just become an adult about her virginity. It's disgusting. Of course, she dated Justin Timberlake, and there were interview clips of him being hyped up and put on a pedestal because of the things that they assumed that he was doing with Britney as his girlfriend. But when Britney was asked about if she was pure or not, she was scrutinized. We also talked to Kevin T. I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name because I botched it last week. Kevin was a backup dancer for Britney between 1999 and 2004. And he is the one who explicitly said Britney is not a puppet. She was in control of her tours. She was super creative, and when the team had something to bring to the table, she was open to it, but at the end of the day, she was the boss and she had the say. A couple interesting people I thought that they interviewed was first Britton Stone. He was the photographer director for US Weekly from 2001 till 2011. I kind of saw him as like a more fancier version of Paparazzi, but basically he had a budget of $140,000 a week. A week. Do you know my student debt is at like $100,000 on its own? That would pay for my student debt. Like $140,000 a week to go get celebrity photos, and of course that included Britney. We are introduced to Daniel Ramos, and don't get me wrong, he might be a good guy who had good intentions, just wanted to feed his family, but when I figured out who he was, my blood started to boil. They put his job title as celebrity videographer, but he's paparazzi. He was paparazzi. It's not that fancy. He was in that industry from 2004 until 2013. He was in the industry during Britney's career. He was one of the main paparazzi that would follow her around. His claim in this interview was, knew at one point that it probably wasn't for the best, but once you get in, it's hard to get out. He proves this by saying that one picture of someone like Britney Spears would rake you in $1 million for one photo. Come to find out later in the documentary, he's the one who she hit with the umbrella, the car, when he was following her just after she had shaved her head. And I've said in my other videos, you know, if I were Britney and I were in that very fragile state where everyone was against me, yeah, I probably would have hit you with an umbrella too, and I'm sorry, Dan, but I think I still stand by that. Britney then goes on in 2006 on Matt Lauer's show. Oh, what times we used to live in. And she speaks about the dangers of paparazzi and what she's experienced as, you know, basically the biggest pop star of this time, what it's like to have your every single step followed and documented. This is where we see Britney break down and cry when Matt asks, what do you do to get the paparazzi to leave you alone? And she says, I just don't know. We're brought into the 2007 head shaving moment, and even more clips resurface of people being absolutely disgusting to Britney and her condition. Kim, who used to work at Jive Records I talked about earlier, I wrote down this quote: "It's so easy and fun to take a young girl and rip her to shreds." And it's true. It feels like as a society we want someone to succeed, we want to put them on a pedestal, especially someone like Britney. She came from a small town, she didn't come from money. So to see this underdog, all-American girl rise up, and then once she has everything and we think that she's unbreakable, which no human is, our society just wants to watch her crumble and laugh at every single step of the process. I wrote down another quote from the head shaving moment in the documentary. The fact people could only see a quote-unquote crazy person in that moment goes to show how dark and twisted the society she was working in is. And it's true. Then the documentary brings us to Sam Lufty, which was her former manager. Her parents called him the start of her downfall. They even eventually got a restraining order against Sam. We did see the documentary really put an emphasis on mental health, how it wasn't something we talked about back then. I have said time and time again, Britney was treated the way that she was treated because of her celebrity status, but also because they even quote saying there was more money in seeing her fall. Between the paparazzi photos and just having a cheap shot at her, it was a dark time. So now we are in 2008, where we see Britney being rushed to the hospital for her mental state by ambulance. While she's in the hospital, the court approves her father and Andrew Wallet to be co-conservators over Britney and her estate. And someone had mentioned, I can't remember who it was, that Jamie wasn't really a huge part of Britney's life all the way up until there was an opportunity to take control of it. Okay, y'all. Here's the tea. I don't have tea. I have this nice water. We're gonna take a sip. Because, this one was a hoot. I don't even have a lot of quotes from her, and that's for a reason. Her name is Vivian Lee Thompson, and she was Britney Spears' lawyer. I applaud the New York Times for trying to get all different sides, but she basically just said, I can't talk exact details because of legalities, but I'll give you hypotheticals. She was really pushing the narrative of, if someone agrees to be in a conservatorship or a court puts them under it and then all of a sudden they try and back out of it, it's a long battle and I've never seen it happen. And so she's basically like putting all the blame on Britney. Britney knew that this was going to happen and she gave in. She just didn't want her father to be her conservator, which ended up happening. Vivian was saying basically if Britney wants out, it's her fault. At least that's the vibe I got. After they finished her interview, they had text that would appear on the screen at certain parts just to keep us updated. Vivian went back after her interview to working for Jamie as his lawyer again. So when I read that, I literally, my jaw dropped and I was like, shit. Another really interesting player was Adam Streisand. Is he related to Barbara Streisand? I don't know. He is a lawyer that is focused on conservatorships and estates. Before the conservatorship was put in place, he got a call from Britney's father's attorneys to go and talk to Britney about the conservatorship. He was basically explaining that he came to Britney, was trying to explain the situation and just get an idea of whether or not Britney was actually in a mental place where she could account for her own attorney and work with one. He said that she thought she was 100% mentally capable of that then and still now. He then goes on to say what I just talked about, that Britney knew that this was inevitable, that it was going to happen. All she said was, and I quote, I do not want my father to be my conservator. And here's the kicker. Streisand had agreed to represent Britney and work with her. The court disagreed and said Britney was not mentally capable of making these kinds of decisions. He said he still doesn't know to this day what was in that report that said that Britney was not deemed mentally capable of handling her own attorney. That is when Britney was officially appointed to Samuel Ingham, her court-appointed attorney. This is the saddest part. They said that there is speculation that they thought Britney gave in to this conservatorship and didn't even try and fight it because she was hoping that it would help her get visitation and or more custody of her children. Jamie gave MTV permission to do a docuseries with Britney. And this is the last time we really got a true glimpse of how Britney felt about her conservatorship and her life. This video is so heartbreaking because she's just talking about how her life is so controlled that there is no freedom, there's no excitement. It feels like she's in a prison. Felicia shared a really heartbreaking story about the fact that once Britney was in the conservatorship, her role really changed when Britney wasn't in charge anymore. She shared this quote and I thought it was so beautiful. Britney never felt judged when she was on stage, just loved. When Britney was on stage, it was her fans, it was people who actually love and appreciate her. So I think it was really good for Britney in the beginning as a coping mechanism, until she realized through these residencies how Jamie was still able to take advantage of her. They said that during her Vegas residency, Britney was pulling in about $1 million a week. But this is a huge reason why Britney decided to stop performing until her dad steps down, because Britney is not profiting off of her own hard work. They brought on the Britney's Graham podcast hosts, which if you've never seen that, I always link them in my Free Britney videos. They have a podcast completely dedicated to just dissecting Britney's crazy Instagram. When Britney's second residency, Domination, got canceled in 2019, they were the ones who received an anonymous voicemail from someone who claimed to be a paralegal on Britney's team. And he said that Jamie wasn't actually sick, which is the reason that we all were made to believe why Britney stepped down from her residency, but that Britney told Jamie enough was enough. I'm not taking these medications. I am not going to continue to work if I'm not going to make my own money. Jamie said, that's it. You're not going to be working anymore, and we're going to blame it on my health. And right after that, Britney was put into a mental health facility, and we still don't know whether or not that was on her own accord or if she was forced there. They also put in this clip from her brother Brian, who did an interview about Free Britney. My conspiracy, I don't have any facts on this. I feel like the family has some kind of written contract where they can't talk about it, which would make total sense if their father is part of the conservatorship. But his interview was so weird. The guy who was interviewing him said something about the fact, well, have you ever looked into Free Britney? Do you think that there's validity in what people are saying? He basically just blew it off and said, well, these Spears women in my family, they're really strong-headed and independent. As a man, it's just really hard and not fair. The podcast host goes, so you're saying women who have free thoughts and constitutional rights, your sisters? And he's like, well, so yeah, that gave me really weird vibes. Now we're circling back to present day in the documentary, and one thing that I really liked that they brought light to was flaws in Britney's case could bring light to cracks in the system as a whole. Unfortunately, we haven't heard anything from Britney about the conservatorship explicitly since that MTV interview. One document that they brought up from Samuel Ingham that actually had quotes from Britney in there shed a lot of light on Britney's stance, even if we can't hear from her herself. Britney welcomes and appreciates the informed support of her many fans. Britney herself is opposed to the effort of her father to keep her legal struggle hidden away in any closet as a family secret, because he has tried to do that through the court system to close everything from the public. In this case, it is not an exaggeration to say that the whole world is watching. Jamie's attorneys responded to this by saying that Jamie and Britney get along swimmingly. Samuel Ingham went back and said, actually, Britney said, I am in fear of my father. I don't see those two aligning very well. A huge conflict of interest in this entire situation is all coming out of Britney's pocket. All of the attorneys on both her father's team and her team, all of the court fees, it's all coming out of Britney's estate. Another reason to question why Britney would not be able to take care of herself, Andrew Wallet, her father's co-conservator over Britney, had written a statement saying that Britney was going to be in a good place to bring in lots of profit for the conservatorship. And Britney's Graham, the podcast host girls, literally said, a conservatorship is to benefit someone who needs stability and help, not to profit on. The last court case that she had, although she petitioned to have her father removed, there is still potential room for that to happen, but as of right now, the courts only allowed Britney to add a new co-conservator to her estate, which is Bessemer Trust. They also had Britney activists who would come on and share what Britney meant to them, why they're fighting for Britney. So one of those gentlemen said, Britney had to navigate being told what to do and who she could be. Circling back to Felicia, I love this quote. I know at some point she will be able to tell her story and it will all fall into place. This was really interesting to me. Of course, they tried to reach out to Britney herself, and they're not even sure if she got the message. I don't even know who they would go through. They also reached out to Jamie Spears, her father, Lynn Spears, mother, Jamie Lynn Spears, her little sister, Brian Spears, Andrew Wallet, Sam Ingham, and Sam Lufty, 7 of them. And all of them either did not respond or rejected to being interviewed. Because they did say in articles that they got backlash, and I'm assuming it had to have been from one or two or all of these people who are listed, but they still proceeded with the documentary, which I applaud the New York Times for. So what are my thoughts? I thought that they did a great job bringing on a lot of different perspectives, people who were in Britney's life, who honestly are probably more unbiased than all the people I just mentioned who didn't want to be a part of it. And even if a lot of this is information you've already been aware of, it just continues to amaze me every time I witness it, that this is something that's actually going on and actually legal in the United States. It's so easy to judge someone on the outside and to think that they have it all, or to just deem them as crazy when you're looking on the outside. But once you actually take a walk in their shoes and look at it from a new light, you start to realize that fame, money, celebrity status, it doesn't make you immune to struggles or tragedies. Also doesn't make you immune to people taking advantage of you. Unfortunately, in Britney's case, it seems to be everyone that should be on her side. If you haven't watched it, it is on Hulu and FX. Let me know down below if you watched it. What were your thoughts? That's all I have for you guys. Thank you again so much for being with me today, being a part of this movement. I really feel passionate about raising awareness for Britney and her circumstances, and I hope that someday we can hop on camera and we can celebrate that she is no longer in this mess. I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys. Not to have oh my god, that's so mean.
Go to bed, but you still up for it.
Because I have to review this. I'm almost done. I'm almost in my notes.
Well, go get her. He just wants to say hi. Hey, you too. She's stuck now.